Welcome everybody to this edition of Attention Talk Video. I'm your host, ADHD and Attention Coach Jeff Copper, and I'm here today to talk to you about emotions, ADHD and emotions, and the regulation of those emotions. As I've learned over the years, ADHD is not so much a deficit of attention, but a self-regulation issue, and attention is something that you need to regulate as well as emotion. In a prior video, we talked about that primitive brain, how it reacts under a threat. It goes to that fight, flight, or freeze. And for those with ADHD, when they feel threatened, they go into that place. Many times they feel paralyzed. So the question is, what do you do? And as a coach and an interview on Attention Talk Radio and Attention Talk Video, it's interesting to me because there's a process here that is ubiquitous. And I say ubiquitous, I've interviewed lots of people that talk about this. They use different words, but the process is basically the same. So fundamentally, as a coach, one of the things that I try to do is help people identify the feeling of that fight, flight, or freeze in their body. Often your brain will lie to you, but your body doesn't lie. So if you feel that tightness in the chest, if you feel that fight, flight, or freeze, if you feel that overwhelming or something like that, you begin to pause and notice it. That's the trigger, if you will, to say, wait a second, I feel I'm going to that fight, flight, or freeze. Melissa Orlov, who works a lot with ADHD couples, she talks about that flooding feeling that kind of comes in, to be able to notice that in your body. Interviewed Autumn Zatani, who's the head of curriculum at Sesame Street, and in season 43, Sesame Street was dedicated to self-regulation, and they did a lot of helping kids, preschoolers, understand emotions, identify emotions, and name emotions. And so the first step for them is when they feel angry or frustrated is to feel that in their body. And so again, ubiquitously, it's number one, you've got to actually notice when you're going into that state. The second thing that you do is once you notice it, you're pausing at that point in time and you want to do something to distance yourself from that threat. For the preschoolers at Sesame Street, they talk about belly breathing, in the mouth and out the nose. Often what I do is I work with people to try to help them understand those things that snap them out of it. I've had some people who need to go splash cold water on their face, some that need to go run for a quarter of a mile, some that need to sit down and draw or play the piano. The point really is you're trying to distance yourself from that emotional trigger and to downregulate your emotions. With Sesame Street, they'll belly breathe in, they go 1, 2, 3, and that pause and that downregulation now is time to allow the executive functioning brain to kind of come online and say, okay, now given the situation, is this a real threat? Is it a perceived threat? And what I do. What I want to highlight is this fundamental process, whether it's Melissa Orlov or myself or what you see in Sesame Street is really very much the same. It's you got to identify that trigger, and the majority of people that I worked with help people try to notice it in their body. Number two is when you notice it, you pause and you do something at that point in time to down-regulate your emotions, whether it's belly breathing or with Melissa Orlov, there's a pause and you leave the room and then you come back for her and you get into what's called a structured conversation. Often with those with ADHD, they fight because there's a symptom of ADHD. The partner has an emotional response to that symptom, and the person with ADHD has an emotional response to that symptom. It spirals out of control. The idea of feeling that flooding feeling, pause, leaving the room, and coming back and going into that structured conversation is to prevent the amplification of those emotions and really kind of stay grounded. For me, when I'm working with people, it's, hey, what do you do? Splash water in your face, go for a run, doodle, listen to music, provide that distance, and then come back and sit down and say, hey, listen, really what's at play here? The one thing I will tell you is that if emotional self-regulation was easy, everybody would be doing it and I wouldn't be doing this video. But it is a process. It is something that really kind of needs to be practiced. I will say this, as a coach, when you come to me, we begin to notice that emotional regulation issue, and that thing that enables you to down-regulate, for me, depends on the person. That's how I've come up with the splashing the water, the running, and those types of things. Everybody has their way to down-regulate. The question is, what is that? It's as individual as the person, and it's something that you can find, but it takes a little bit of self-observation. Kind of like telling them about a time when your emotions were off the chart, or you were paralyzed, and all of a sudden you were much better, and you begin to look at those points in time. So the bottom line is I hope you watch the prior video that we did this with regard to fight, flight, freeze, so you understand it's an automatic brain response. It's in every living thing, which is a good thing. But when it comes to those with ADHD, it can be challenged, particularly in a situation where they're threatened, or more importantly, there's a perceived threat. And just try to outline that process that most people teach in order for everybody to kind of downregulate their emotion and bring their executive function online to be able to engage it to do what they would do. So, with that said, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of Attention Talk Video. If you haven't done so already, please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel at attentiontalkvideo.com. And with that, we hope you've enjoyed the show.